So, this is now the seventh, I believe, and final part of our discussion of Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment, where we're going to discuss the epilogue and, I guess, by doing so, the entire book and kind of what we made of it. Yeah, so usually I summarize more or less briefly each chapter at the beginning, but I'm not going to do that now because in terms of plot, there's really not that much that happened. Basically, Raskolnikov is in prison in Siberia, and yeah, that's pretty much all that happens. There's a bit more obviously on the family and the people who know him and that kind of stuff, but I think people who've just read the epilogue will remember roughly what happens. Yeah, I don't know. Do you have any initial major point you want to talk about, or shall we just, I don't know, I have like lots of smallish points almost in a way.
I'm wondering, I'm almost disagreeing with you that nothing is happening in the epilogue.
You can't disagree with me. That's not what this is for.
Because it's, on some level nothing happens, but there's not a lot of action. But I do still think there's a bit of a twist in a sense that for the first part of the epilogue, he's still no guilt, nothing, like no sign of bad conscience, and etc. And then all of a sudden, he realizes that he's in love with Sonia and that she's in love with him, and that changes everything.
Does
so
it?
I think, pardon?
Does it change everything?
Well, I think that is for me the first time that he has any sort of intense emotion.
Positive, intense emotion.
Yeah.
He's had lots of negative, intense emotions so far.
But
I mean, it seemed to me like it ended like almost in a happy ending, but the happy ending was just a few years, then I'll get out of here.
No, but he is kind of like turning.
He's got the Gospels.
Yeah, well, so for me, the way I understood it is through loving her, he starts to, in some way, to be a human being and has a bad conscience and wants to kind of like, follow religion and deal with what he's done.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, no? I get like the change in him that, this woman he wants to spend time with, that he thinks he actually loves her, which is, that's nice. If you want to spend your life with someone, if she's moved to Siberia for you, it's good that you finally realized that. So I got that, but the last paragraph is, but here a new story begins, the story of a man's gradual renewal and gradual rebirth, his gradual crossing from one world to another, of his acquaintance with a new, as yet unknown reality. That could be a subject for another tale. Our present one has ended. So, I mean, he's hinting at it, but, I mean, part of the question is, like, how long is this going to last? Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
But I think that the way it's ending, it seems like he's definitely changed. Because this is the last paragraph. This is story of a man's gradual renewal and gradual rebirth, of his gradual crossing from one world to another. So I think, so for me, this is pretty much like in the last 2 pages, like everything that's building up, like first him committing the crime and then not.
In a way, yes, right. But like, so one thing that slightly makes me question this, it's almost, I mean, in a way, I think it's almost too positive, the ending, given the entire book. But so that makes me maybe slightly question exactly what's going on here. But one thing is here that so we're talking about the last page again. He's got the Gospels underneath his pillow, and it says like he asked her for the Gospels before he fell ill, and then it also says he hasn't actually looked at the book. Like if he asked for the book, it's underneath his pillow, which probably just means it's with him, right? You probably don't have a large storage area in prison. But my point is just that he's basically just lying in bed and having like maybe a small epiphany, but it doesn't seem like there's much behind it to me.
Don't you think that sometimes things change on an implicit level or something we don't consciously think about. The way,
Sure.
so this is how I perceived him asking for the book and then not looking at it because he hasn't made a conscious decision, oh, I'm now gonna believe in God.
I see.
But he had some sort of like just something within him made him ask for the book, and then now he has the realization that this is the path he wants to go.
Maybe. I guess my point is, I guess the why I'm slightly questioning exactly how strong this is supposed to be is that, you know, when you're lying in bed, a lot of things can seem very important to you, and then the next morning you've forgotten all about it. So, of course, he did ask her for the book, so that, you know, suggests that it's a bit more than just, you know, that flash of inspiration, you know, on Sunday evening when you think like, I'm going to be productive next week. I wonder whether it's more that kind of thing. I guess it's for him, it's almost that's a major step, but.
And I think kind of see it differently to the way you're using it, because I agree, yes, in reality and in our day-to-day life, it rarely ever happens that all of a sudden you have this epiphany and then life changes and you know for the rest of your life like exactly what you want to do, etc. But indeed sometimes some things appear very important in a situation, and the next situation they've lost their importance and things change constantly, and we might mean something on one day and then not mean it anymore on the other day. However, in the context of a book, it's fiction, and I think Dostoevsky, I assume, very much wanted to end this book showing a character that has completely changed, and it's almost a bit like the way I see a bit of a lesson to be taught that only through true love or through loving somebody you can really feel guilt, and as long as you don't love, then you don't feel guilty or don't confront yourself with your.
Yeah, but don't you think it's too strong after the entire book? I mean, I guess he has been like in Siberia for half a year or something. It just seems a bit cheesy to me. I don't know. Maybe I'm too cynical or something, but it seems a bit over the top. Then again, I guess everything is a bit over the top in a lot of Russian literature I've read, but I don't know. It's just too much of a reversal within like 5 pages.
But then, I don't know, what does it do to somebody who's in prison camp in Siberia? Maybe it indeed truly changes you as a person and the way you think about your actions.
I guess. I don't know. I mean, here it would be interesting to know what exactly was the case with Dostoevsky himself. I mean, I don't, you know, as I think I've said before, like I don't really like taking an author's biography into a book. I think it's, if the book can't stand by itself, then it's not really a good book. But in this case, where we maybe have differences of interpretation, and it's not that we obviously need to find a common answer here, but I mean, it says, I think Dostoevsky was in a working prison camp in Siberia. I think in the notes it says that he was the same class actually as Raskolnikov. I think it said in the notes, I can't remember. So I wonder whether maybe he did himself go through that process while there. But I don't know why he was in prison, whether it was, I mean, I'm pretty sure he didn't murder anyone, but that maybe if we are to look up what he did in prison, then maybe that would answer it a bit, but yeah.
But what would it, because I do understand it's not like, it doesn't appear to me like it's necessarily taken out of real life, and it is a bit exaggerated and maybe a bit cheesy, but I'm wondering because he did want to have some sort of conclusion, I assume, and show some like lesson or learning of some kind. So I wonder how else he could have approached it. I mean, I guess he could have started the whole epilogue with, because at some point there needs to be the turning point, but he could have added another chapter.
I mean, so
explaining in more detail.
What I find tricky about the epilogue is that it seems to me like you have this guy who's just a complete mess for 600 pages. And then this epilogue, so this is one thing that I wrote down that really annoyed me, is that they talk about his trial and why he was given a fairly lenient trial for double homicide of only 8 years in working camp. And some of the mitigating factors were that apparently it turns out he was actually a saint before all this stuff went down. Wait, if you give me a second, I'll find the page. So this is page 641 and following. Quite unexpectedly, other circumstances also emerged that greatly favored the defendant. The former student Razumikin managed to exhume some information, enabling him to prove that the criminal Raskolnikov, during his time at university, spent all he had on helping a poor consumptive fellow student and supported him almost single-handedly for half a year. When his friend died, Raskolnikov took care of his old invalid father, whom his friend had supported and fed by his own labor ever since early teens. Eventually placed the old man in a hospital, and when he died, too, arranged his burial. Meanwhile, the widow Tsanitsina, Raskolnikov's former landlady and the mother of his dead fiancé, testified that when they were still living at the previous address at the Five Corners, Raskolnikov had pulled 2 small children out of a burning apartment at night and was himself burnt in the process. The fact was thoroughly investigated and blah, blah, blah. So what I find, by the way, first, can we just highlight the fact that it's important that he pulled 2 burning children out of a building at night? Can we just highlight the fact that the at night is added there? Like, if it was during the daytime, no one would care. It's just, like it was dark. That's how you know how good this guy is. Anyway, but what I don't like is that you have this guy who basically behaves terribly, let's just say, with seemingly no moral conscience or moral compass for pretty much all of the book, apart from maybe I guess it's a fairly major subplot. The whole idea with Marmeladov and then with Zonya and giving her the money and that kind of stuff. But apart from that, he's just a horrible person throughout the entire book. It says even in the epilogue, it says that even the prison inmates hate him. Just no one likes him. He just seems to be a terrible person. And then suddenly in the epilogue, it's like, oh yeah, by the way, he's this saintly figure though who does all this helping for other people. And then suddenly he has this transformation. I just don't buy it. I don't know. Maybe I just don't like the way it's written rather than... Maybe you're right that that's what Dostoevsky tried to do, and I just don't like the way Dostoevsky's doing it, but it just seems a bit fake to me.
Yeah, fake, or maybe he truly is almost, it was like the whole book is an episode of some split personality, manic phase.
That's kind of what the epilogue is saying, right?
Yeah.
There's this whole discussion about his temporary insanity. And that maybe that's what was going on. And maybe this whole book is kind of to show that, everyone has bad episodes, murders 2 women, and then goes back to being a saint again. But I don't know, like if you want to show someone, I guess he says, like, he doesn't want to show the transformation, right? It's just hinting at it, basically. That's what he's trying to do. He says this whole changing of someone is a different book. I'm not going to do that here. That's the last paragraph, right? But it seems a bit over the top. I don't know.
Well, they can't really argue.
Like, just show him being an average person at first. Like, you don't have to go from double homicide, being horrible to everyone, to saint. Just show him being normal. But
he's not a saint. He
okay, maybe not a saint, but you know what I mean.
He feels guilty, and that makes him an average person. Or he confesses, and he
was bullied by his girlfriend to confess.
Pretty mad.
She was just harassing him.
Yeah, but I think he is a normal person, and obviously, sometimes when we do something we regret, we want to be good for the rest of our life. And it is like this split moment after regretting something. When you regret something that you maybe take some sort of extreme stance towards ethics or morality, and you really truly believe that never ever anything like this is gonna happen to you again. So maybe there is a bit of a super ethical and highly moral approach he wants to take, but I think it is normal to feel like this. It is normal after having done something so horrible that you would regret it and would want to change your life for the better and never do anything like this again.
Yeah, the problem I have is that even in the epilogue, there's still this discussion that he feels no guilt about the entire thing. That his only shame... Wait, I wrote this down. The one quote is on 651. That was the only crime he acknowledged, that he hadn't coped and had turned himself in. That's literally...
Yeah, but then it
pages,
changes, no? I completely agree with you. For the beginning of the epilogue, he doesn't feel guilty at all, but then it really changes in the last 2 pages or so.
Yeah, but I guess my point is just that that's too rapid of a change. Or let's put it this way, for it to be a lasting change. I mean, yeah, I get that maybe you don't want to end the book as bleakly as everything else has been in this book, but I think like I think at least in my experience, epiphanies rarely actually lead to anything. It's a long, gradual, slow process. Maybe this is just the first one.
Sure, but then I think this is pretty much the argument you made at the beginning, and I do agree with you. This is not a real life example. It's rarely ever happens like this, that you have an epiphany and then it's like life change forever. But I still also don't think that Dostoevsky's aim was to tell a story taken out from life. As in, like, I don't think that this was his main point here.
No, of course, the point is not to just, replicate reality, but it's supposed to have some sort of reasonable relationship to it. And I feel like that is the aim, right? I mean, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I agree. Like, maybe this is just the first realization that maybe he did something wrong, which so far he hadn't really had. Even when he handed himself in, it was more just because he left, and then Sonia was standing there and he went, shit. But it seemed to me more like almost not being forced towards it, but how should I say, strongly encouraged. And this is maybe just the first step in his evolution to being not a terrible person. It just felt a bit strong to me. Maybe that's just what I'm saying.
But there is a long way ahead of him, right? And I think this is like this whole...
Yeah, I mean...
Like the 7 years, the 7 remaining years are a bit symbolic in that sense, that it's not only about him having to be in prison and then only after 7 years he can get married, but it's more like he has 7 years now to process everything he's done and work through everything, work on himself and pay the price in some way. So I feel like this is just not part of the book.
I guess I was just arguing against the idea, whether you said it or not, that suddenly everything's good again now. And well, I guess maybe all you said was that like a lot happened and that he had this epiphany. I guess that's what you said. And he did have that. Maybe I don't know. It's a first step for him. I don't know. I don't know whether anyone... I'm sure someone must have written a sequel to this. Crime and Punishment 2. What would the subtitle be?
Well, it's more punishment, and it is hopefully not another crime.
Yeah, crime and Punishment 2. This time there's no crime. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know whether Dostoevsky actually wrote, not literally the second part of this book, a continuation. I don't know whether he literally, but like figuratively wrote a kind of redemptive story after that. Don't know. Anyway, I mean, it is nice to see that he's had some sort of positive thought about someone. That's good. Mm-hmm. But yeah, is that going to carry you through 7 years of being in prison? Everyone hates you. We'll see. I don't know. Even Sonia, I mean, I feel like even her supposed love for him seems a bit weird. Number one, they don't know each other. Number two, she's just following him around.
but do you remember like one point you raised, I think in our last discussion, was that she could be or symbolize his moral compass. And if you think about her more as an abstract thing rather than his
more
lover
idea
or
than a person.
Rather than like a person with the... But maybe obviously the moral compass, wherever you go, it kind of like follows you, is your conscious. It's like you can't really escape it, and if you decide to work with it, you're actually far better off. And if you realize how important it is for you, or it is part of you, really.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out then if she's to be understood more metaphorically than literally, why do all the other prisoners love her? Is that just there's this like passage where all the other prisoners just think she's awesome? Is that because I mean, this really sounds like a book in favor of prison reform. It almost sounds like an advertisement for prisons. Then that as soon as you go into prison, people start loving the inner moral compass. Even if it's someone else's. I don't know. This doesn't make sense, but
yeah, I mean, she has something godly, so maybe she can also be seen in like more of a religious not a religious context, but she has something about her which is godly. She's like such a pure soul that doesn't really exist in real life. She is only good and selfless and understanding, and only wants the best for everybody, and which is makes her almost like just like Mother Teresa kind of figure.
In a way, yes, but like the one problem I have with describing her in this way is that she's also just like she has no skill or anything. Like if you're this kind of saintly person, it seems like you should have some sort of like she's just there. Right? Like,
but why? But isn't there like a part in the Bible where there's a prostitute and they're kind of like the outcast, and then Jesus eats with her, isn't it? Maria Magdalena. I might be completely wrong here.
I don't know. I haven't.
So if I'm wrong, we have to look it up, and if so, you have to take it out.
I don't know. I only went to Catholic school for 9 years. I don't know what happens in the Bible.
Okay, so if I'm not wrong, there's this part in the Bible where Jesus kind of like shows that only because you are, the lowest of the lowest in terms of our society, you can still be a pure soul, and he decides not to eat with the riches, but with
I mean, isn't your inner courage or whatever supposed to be something more or your inner moral compass or whatever she's supposed to signify? Isn't it supposed to be something a bit more than just simply being there after you kill people? I don't know. To me, she's just a complete victim, and to me, even her following him around doesn't seem like a choice or anything. He basically says, "I want to spend my life with you." After he's just in that chapter where he's just really rude to her the entire time. I mean, she almost has like a minor case of Stockholm syndrome where someone just is really abusive to her, and so she just follows him around. It's like, to me, that's not exactly a.
Yeah, but again, I think like the way we're reading this is so different, because I completely agree on like if you just look at the facts, and like this is like the worst depiction of like a female character. She's like obviously has no power.
The only value she has is through her sex.
Pardon?
The only value she has is through her sex, either by giving money to her siblings or by being with Raskolnikov. Yeah,
pretty much. But from that perspective, obviously, like, this is not. She's a weak character and not. Yeah, pretty much everything you don't want the female gender to be associated to. But again, I don't really take her literally. I see it more as a metaphor. At least since you mentioned it. I see it here like this.
Damn it. I built up my own argument here. No, I know what you mean. It's just somehow I feel like if I'd been a Russian novelist in the 19th century, with the hindsight of not being a novelist in the 19th century, but living in the 21st century, I feel like I would have written her some sort of stronger qualities, like something that doesn't just seem like she's following. I don't know, maybe the following him that's the whole point. If she's,
but I think that's the whole point, because she's always there. This is a skill, right? No matter what happens, he even confesses to having killed her good friend, and she's always sensed she's not leaving him where other people would have left him. Other people would have left him way earlier. So her strong quality is being there and sticking.
I don't know, maybe that's enough with a moral compass. You just have to have one. If it's always there, you pay attention to it, then. Yeah, I mean, I think one problem I also have is that I don't really like talking about books and when people are metaphors for stuff. I like having books that are where people do stuff that seems... I mean, everything that the people do in this book seems reasonable, right? It's not necessarily particularly likely in some cases, but I think in general, I'm just not a fan of people standing for concepts or something. Like, let people make interesting choices that reveal who they are and that kind of stuff, rather than we have to figure out now whether Sonia, I don't know, what she is, you know. But yeah, I don't know. I don't really have anything to add to that anymore. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's it. Shall we move on to discussing the book in general?
Yeah, so I think one thing that we predicted correctly is that Razumikin and Dunya, Raskolnikov's sister, ended up together.
Yeah.
So well done us for predicting that, which was totally not obvious.
The mother died, which I didn't predict.
Yeah, and I didn't expect that she was going to be quite as much in kind of semi-denial. I don't know exactly how to call it, but...
I think denial describes you quite accurately.
I guess with denial you know it, but pretend you don't, but
but but I think she denied self-denial. Because it became apparent before she died, and she was kind of like half hallucinating and talking. It became apparent how much she actually had guessed or known.
Or maybe someone had told her or something, yeah. To be fair, I didn't find that part too interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know whether you have anything to add there, but to me, I feel like we should maybe mention it for a second, but I don't really have anything to add there. Okay. Shall we... I have a few things, but is there anything that you want to talk about in particular about big topics about the book? Or
no, you fire ahead.
Okay, here we go. Maybe as a kind of slightly random starting point, shall we talk about Raskolnikov's dream before he had the epiphany? Because at first it sounded like he was describing COVID pandemic. He said, in a sickness he'd imagined the entire world condemned to some terrible, unheard of pestilence advancing on Europe from deepest Asia. Pretty good there. Everyone was to die apart from the very few who'd been chosen. New trichnia had appeared, microscopic beings that were entering human bodies. The reason I'm mentioning this is because then that leads to basically a kind of form of what Raskolnikov has been thinking of the entire time, namely some people being superior to others inherently, some chosen people, which I think if you've ever, opened a history book, you can see where that leads to in the extreme. And Raskolnikov definitely has quite a lot of beliefs, at least until the last few pages. Maybe they changed then, but until then he has like a lot of beliefs around that there are some people who are superior than others and that he's one of them. So yeah, it's kind of interesting like hearing about these things like when it's written like in the middle of the 19th century, and then you see kind of what happens afterwards when people just really embrace that kind of thing. I mean, I guess it's not really new, right? Like it's just a form of racism.
It just reappears throughout history, right? And I think also at the moment it's very current topic with Black Lives Matter, etc. So it takes different shapes and form, but
it's more explicit here and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's true.
Like you have to be very racist now to say that there are some people who are just in general superior to others and that kind of thing. Like that's a pretty strong stance now. It seemed to me like then it wasn't necessarily as much of a statement. Yeah.
But I mean, it's not so long ago that if you look at South Africa and apartheid was still a thing. So I think it can also come back, or it has come back, and this is, I think, my my point here that maybe right now in our society, we're not allowed to say certain things because they're not politically correct, but...
Antonia, on this podcast, you can say whatever you believe.
No, but I think there is, there are big groups of people who think of themselves as superior. I'm not pretending I'm an expert on this.
I've seen like 3 videos on Reddit. That's basically everything.
But it is, like group thinking, right? It's like in-group, out-group. And we are generally, I think, just more drawn to our own group and think of it in more positive lights than the out group. And if this is where you stop, or this where it stops, then and you don't reflect any further, then maybe it can lead you to genuinely believing that your group is better than another group.
I mean, one thing that just occurred to me, and maybe I should read this passage a bit more carefully again. The interesting thing is actually, in a way, I mean, it is racism in the sense that it says, like, in the whole world, there were only few survivors. These were the pure and the chosen, those destined to begin a new race of people and a new life, right? So that's like very explicitly, it's about a race of people and that kind of stuff. But it doesn't seem like it's actually linked to anything in particular. It doesn't say like, this disease washed out or killed like everyone in Africa and everyone in Asia and kept only the supreme Russians or whatever, It does like when you actually, I think it does actually suggest that the supreme race could be actually made up of anyone. Yeah. And right now I'm wondering whether I can't remember exactly where the stream leads, but it leads pretty quickly to the end of the book. So I'm wondering whether that's the people who've received the word of God. Is that the chosen ones? Just anyone who believes in the Bible? Not entirely sure.
I don't know, but because I still don't... I wouldn't think so, because for me it's like the opposite, right? It's like his delusioned thinking that there are some superior chosen ones who can do anything they wish to achieve their goals. But then what the Bible says is exactly the opposite, which is, no, you're all the same. You're all little sheep, and if you murder somebody, that's a sin, and you can't just do whatever you want to do. So for me, it's...
Yeah, unless you like go to hell, right? Unless you're like not a Christian. I'm not clear on all the details.
But the idea of the chosen ones would be that they don't have to go to hell, right? If there's like the superior group of people, they can do whatever they want. They don't have to go to hell.
Yeah, okay.
But then the Bible says, no, that's not how it works.
You have to choose the Bible, then you're in the person. Yeah. Yeah, no, okay, maybe it just occurred to me that happens, that's one of the last things that happens before he has this dramatic reversal. Wait, actually, let me just... Yeah, I mean, after that, it pretty much immediately goes into Sonia sees him a lot, and so I find it really hard not to read things literally. There's this thing where it says, once towards evening, when he'd almost completely recovered, Raskolnikov fell asleep. Waking up, he happened to go to the window and suddenly caught sight of Sonia in the distance by the hospital gates. She was standing there as though she was waiting for something. I'm just imagining her now just standing there all day. Just like outside the hospital gate, just staring into the distance for like days on end.
Yeah, but then I think she almost like, she believes in him. She knows, maybe she believes in him. I know it's not literal, but I just find it funnier to imagine it's literal. Yeah, but it's because he probably doesn't even know himself where he's going, and he already wanted to kill himself even, but she sees the worth in his life, and she knows that he's gonna, at some point, he's gonna turn around and he's gonna see it more clearly. So in some ways, she already knows what he doesn't know yet. No?
Yeah. I don't know. It's really hard. I mean, like this is maybe the larger discussion we can have. Well, I guess we already had a bit, but we can return to a bit. Is the idea of what kind of person Raskolnikov is, to put it very bluntly. So basically, for most of the book, he's a horrible person. I think that's pretty uncontroversial. But he also is. He does seem like he's in some sort of frenzy for most of the time.
Yeah.
And like what I find it really hard because like part of me just thinks, okay, here's a guy who thinks for whatever reason he's better than everyone else, and thinks he can do whatever he wants, and his only goal in life is to not get not only goal in life, but like that's just basically what he does, and he acts accordingly, and is just full of himself for no reason. But then again, as much as I don't like the way this is written, there are these parts where he's nice to people. You also have to wonder why Razumikin was so adamant to help Raskolnikov. Because like in the parts that we read, there's no reason why Razumikin would really help him, right? Like he's just... Raskolnikov goes up to Razumikin not because they're good friends, but because maybe Razumikin can give him a job and some money. That's the only reason Raskolnikov goes there, right? Then he behaves really weirdly and leaves again after 5 minutes, and then suddenly Razumikin just helps him for weeks or whatever, and then when just gets completely invested in, and it does make me wonder whether maybe Raskolnikov actually used to be a decent person before whatever change happened. Then there's a story with his fiancée dying, whether that was maybe a bit of a turning point for him and he found it difficult to deal with that, and that maybe before that he was actually a decent person. I don't know.
Could be, especially because it would kind of like close the circle, because assumingly he very loved her very much, his fiancée, and then she died and things went downhill, and the only way out of this frenzy, or the moment he realized he's able to step out of it, is when he falls in love again, which would kind of nicely close the circle and maybe suggest that you can only through loving can be a...
Well, there's three things, right? Love, God, and hard prison labor. Those are the three things that make you a better person.
Yeah, pretty much.
I should try prison labor. Sounds easier than the other two.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it is weird because... I mean, actually, I read the epilogue and then kind of thought about the book, and I hadn't really paid too much attention to the last 2-3 pages, it seems, because I kind of forgot about most of that. And then I kind of wrote down like what I thought the book was about, and then I wrote down, to me, it's a book about a guy struggling to realize that maybe he's not all that special. And that's kind of before I really thought about this reversal and maybe thinking too much about whether he was maybe a good person before or not.
Yeah, I think it's almost, I assume, Dostoevsky did it on purpose, that throughout the book you had very little cues hinting to Raskolnikov having been a better person. Like a couple of things that are being mentioned, but in general you get the impression he's just like a complete idiot, put it bluntly. But then in the end, when we maybe we would have read the book very differently if we would have known that he used to be a, quotation marks, good person. And I almost think that it's on purpose, that you only realize in the end that maybe, he's not only purely bad, but has lost the path.
Yeah, I think that's a possibility. And I mean, there's a few things, right? So the first thing is, this is a weird combination of very plot driven and then people just talking for hours on end. But the first part, I think, is very much fairly plot driven in the sense that it's just about the day or the day or 2 days or whatever during which she commits the murder. And so you also don't want to like slow down the plot, right, by continually saying like, oh, all these good things he did. So in part, it's a kind of structural thing, I almost think, to kind of, like, you don't want to have a book where like the first 40 pages is just explaining the situation, what happened to everyone, it's just boring. But I agree, I think it is also like intentional to I don't know, maybe shine light on why people do terrible things. And that to some extent, oh, here we go, metaphorical again, that to some sense, maybe Raskolnikov himself forgot about how good of a person he is. But in a literal kind of way, right, that he was so stuck in the situation, he wasn't actually thinking about all the other things he had been doing before. And that maybe only, oh God, this is really coming full circle, and that only in prison, when he got the time to think about it, that he actually realized, oh yeah, I kind of did do those good things. Or in the court process, I guess that happened. Yeah, I mean, I guess, like, as I said, like, there are some positive things he does in the book. When he tries to help this Marmeladov guy who he has no. I mean, sure, he saw the poverty they were in and all that kind of stuff, and I mean that's he seemed to have some sort of sympathy for them, right?
Well, yeah, sometimes he almost surprisingly did very good deeds, and which couldn't really be explained in the context of his actions, as for example the Marmeladov and giving the widow, giving all the money to the widow, etc., trying to help them. It's like this came out of the blue. However, would we have known that he used to be a somewhat caring and good person? Wouldn't have been so surprising.
Yeah, then it would just been one of a few things. I mean, maybe he's just, how should we say, emotionally a bit extreme. He tends to go from one extreme to the other. And that in the book is presented basically as if he's only at one extreme all the time, even though this was just a phase. He did still kill 2 people. Let's not downplay this. I find it difficult to think about like what exactly we are to make of his argument. This essay he wrote, or this piece he wrote about some people should be allowed to do it. Whether that's, for example, does that? It seems to have fallen, I guess, more into his more sane phase, right? Because it seems like he actually wrote a coherent argument, which I don't think could have done in the time that the book was written and that kind of mental state. So he seems to have been fairly stable. Yet the way we've just been discussing it seems almost like that whole thing of following through with it is part of his insanity.
Yeah. I think it's still a valid moral question whether under some circumstances some people should be allowed to do things that in a different context would be completely unethical.
We do kind of have that in some parts of society. I mean, I had one interview in my podcast with, we barely talked about it in that podcast, but it was someone who discussed morality in the context of war. And, you can kill people if 2 countries are at war. You're not going to go to prison for that, right? Like if you have different rules there. So, we do have, this is not for certain people per se. It's more in a different context, people are allowed to do things. But we do have these kind of things where it's not that the same ideals always apply necessarily. Equally in all contexts.
I completely agree. And I think also another example would be revolutionaries who free a country from a dictator, for example. I think this is an example we discussed at the very beginning of this book discussion series. That in some circumstances you might have a higher goal, and maybe let's use the example of the revolutionary who might, like in the process, maybe people get killed, but maybe the end goal is so beneficial to so many people and saves so many lives that it's almost, it seems that they should be allowed to do something like this. However, if you only look at each action out of context, for example, a murder, then it's obviously something that you shouldn't be allowed to. So I think I guess what I'm trying to say is that it is a valid moral question, and I don't think there's a straightforward answer, because simply ruling it out that nobody should ever, in whatever situation, ever be allowed to do something that's normally seen as unethical. I think that's too easy. It's a bit more of a layered question.
Yeah. I think what we can say, though, is that in Raskolnikov's case, it was not justified. There's this question of, do the means justify the ends? And, that's the weird thing in Raskolnikov's case. He didn't really have any ends, per se. He never took the money. He never looked into what it was. So in his case, that's kind of what I was saying for most of this, not today, but like in previous episodes for most of the discussion. He didn't really do it to justify it. I think he kind of just wanted to kill the woman because he was angry at her or whatever. So, even though the general discussion and the general philosophical point or moral point he wrote about and that the book addresses in some parts might be can't remember how my sentence started. Even though that might be a valid point, I think it's also very obvious that Raskolnikov killed someone not for the kick of it. He obviously didn't enjoy doing it, but he didn't really. It never seemed like there was really a properly clear goal or end goal. I mean, you could, of course, maybe say that he did have this goal. He did want to have the money, so his sister didn't have to bring it to him.
Yeah, but it's not.
But just briefly, and that once he killed the person, he kind of felt guilty about taking the money, that kind of thing. Maybe that's also something. But I mean, as we've discussed, also like just because your sister's marrying someone doesn't mean you have to kill old ladies to make money. And if you want to make money, that's probably not the most lucrative way to do it either. Even, I don't know anything about 19th century Russia. Pretty sure there are more richer people or whatever. Yeah. So maybe a good moral point, but not in this instance.
But then I think, isn't that kind of like part of the question? Because if you would assume that it is under some circumstances for some people all right to do things that normally are not considered to be ethical, how do you know? Because you might be, such as Raskolnikov, really believe that you're justified to do something, and you truly believe it, but how do you know? Because you might just be having a manic phase, or you might be completely misjudging the situation. So I think this is just like the question leading on to it. If you say, yes, okay, some people under some circumstances can do such things, who is the judge who says, okay, now you are allowed to you're allowed to kill somebody?
Other than God.
Other than God, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's why. There's different things, right? So I think there's a difference here between action or outcomes that are reversible and those that are not. So if I steal some money from, Raskolnikov just tried to steal money from the lady, let's say. Maybe it would have been difficult at this instance, but let's say he could have stolen money in general. That's the kind of thing where it can lead to suffering, but you can also return the money. You can kind of, for example, if his conscience suddenly started kicking in, he could have just, deposited the money in an envelope at night or whatever. But he hit the old lady 3 times with an axe on the head, so that's something that you can't really reverse. So I think, like, I don't know.
But what are you saying? Are you saying for actions that are reversible, you should feel entitled to? Because it's not really the answer. No, what I mean is question, like
the certainty that you should have should be almost infinitely higher for irreversible actions than for reversible actions. If what you need to do to get to something that you think is good for society, whatever, if that can be changed very easily, then the stakes aren't quite as high as if it can't be changed back. So that, what I mean is just like in those two situations, it slightly changes the level or the amount of certainty you probably need, or you probably feel yourself. You should need.
Yeah, but then I think the problem with being on a manic phase is that you probably it seemed like the only option, because he didn't go through several options really. He didn't have a plan B of any sort or think it through. It very much seemed like, okay, this is the only option.
I mean, this is, I think, you mentioned entitlement earlier. I think he felt entitled to be allowed to do the action, because it's not so much, I think, that maybe he thought he could do this in this circumstance, but rather that the person he was should be allowed to do this kind of thing. I think there's do you see the slight difference? I mean, like there's a difference between thinking this is the only way I can do it and therefore I have to do it, and thinking I'm the kind of person who should be allowed to get away with. And it seems to me that maybe he was more the latter than the former, because as we said, like there's so many ways. I mean, to be fair, like if you're desperate, it can see that there's no way out, sure. And he was definitely desperate, but there's so many ways that this could have been resolved without killing anyone.
Yeah.
But I don't know who can decide over who's allowed to do what. I mean, I guess ultimately we have a law for that, right? We have kind of two ways of doing that, right? The one is the legal system, and the other is the kind of interpersonal moral system, where even if something's legal, people might ostracize you for doing something.
Yeah.
And then in the final instance, of course, we've got God again. But
yeah, but I don't think it's like it's also not a question that can be easily answered, because it is context specific, but person specific, and probably also, you know, there is no, let's say there's some evil dictator, you might feel entitled to kill that person, but that dictator could also be a caring father, and you also killed a caring father. So, you know, like whatever level you look at, there are probably different answers. So, whereas most people might agree that it's justified to kill an evil dictator, no, maybe not most people, but a lot of people would agree, or would think that's justified. A lot of people would disagree that it's justified to kill a caring father. I think, yeah. So,
and I guess like what in this book, it's a slightly clearer case, right? Where when the lady that was being killed, no one liked her, right? She, at least in Raskolnikov's perception, and in the vague gossip he heard while he was in a pub once, it's not like she is a loving mother, right? As far as we can tell.
Yeah. However, and here comes the next metaphor. He can't kill only her, but he kills her good counterpart, the sister, which is basically the good side. He can't only kill the evil side of a person, but he always kills.
The good is always not in the bad. That's maybe slightly different, but yeah. Then again, the good here again symbolized by someone who's just a complete moron by all accounts. I mean, that's how she's described, right? Like as someone who's just incapable of anything, who has like Sonia, almost a person who's just there.
Passive.
Yeah, passive. Yeah, that's exactly the word. Just very passive, and doesn't really. Yeah, passive is better than moron, because, well, I think both of them, well, at least aren't displayed as intelligent, but the main problem, I think, is just they're just being pushed around all day. Anyway, I think so. I think we should probably say that this podcast does not endorse killing old ladies for monetary gains. In case this
nor killing anybody, I think, but
yeah, even if ladies are young or not ladies, don't take an axe and club someone to death, unless there's a really good reason for it.
No, I wouldn't suggest that.
Okay, but yeah. Anyway,
shall we move on to discussing the book discussion?
So you mean like not about the book, but about the podcast and that kind of stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so let's make a few more general points. So the first thing is I started off, I think, the entire discussion by talking about the shape of my book, because to remind people, my book is pentagonal. It stands flatly, but yeah, it has kind of two top sides, and then a kind of, yeah, whatever, you know what a pentagon looks like. So I contacted someone related to publishing the book, and apparently I'm not the only person who has this. Apparently I'm one of the few people, though, who has a copy that looks cool. Apparently most of them just, I got a ruined copy. So unfortunately I feel like I probably have a unique, it's not unique though if it's mass produced, but I always wondered like whether I have a unique cover or not, and it seems that there are actually quite a few, something just went wrong in the printing, and lots of books like this.
It's not good advertisement.
Yeah, I thought I was special, like Raskolnikov. Turns out I'm not. Well, neither is this book. That's the first part. The second thing is I had a brief look, and there are many other podcasts actually discussing Crime and Punishment. And obviously none as good as ours, which I can say because I haven't listened to any of the others. But some people, I'm not surprised that they are like, 20-minute discussions of the book. There are some that actually go through it chapter by chapter.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, there are some which is like 20, 30 minutes per chapter. I think let's be honest. They overdid it.
We've underperformed.
No, I think we found the sweet spot. I think some people, only do 20 minutes. Some people do 12 hours or whatever. I think we're going to be somewhere pretty much in the middle. Which is where we want to be. But if you, if you're still listening, then get a life. Why are you listening to us for 6 hours? Do something with your life. But you can, if you're interested in this, there are many more podcasts apparently out there that discuss this book at length. So it seems like, if once this is finished, there's much more to explore.
Yeah, compile and compare.
Yeah, and the last thing I kind of have is, so this is the first book discussion series we've done. As a matter of fact, the first, as part of this podcast, but for me also in my life, I've never sat down for an hour a week with someone and talked about a book for like 8 weeks or whatever, 7 weeks. I don't know. What did you? Was this worth your time, Antonia? Or
it definitely was. It's obviously a bit of work, or like not work, but like commitment, time, a bit of effort.
Yeah.
But I got a lot out of it, and I think I realized how when you're normally reading a book and you're just reading it for yourself, you miss a lot of things. Yeah. You don't think about all the points in great detail. You take a lot for given, or you think that you understand certain points, and then when you're discussing it, you really see that there are very different views and opinions. So yeah, I think I probably have a much better understanding and idea of the book now after having discussed it. I don't
think there's a single book I know as well as this one. I mean, I've never spent this much time on a book. I mean, there are longer books I've read, so maybe it's roughly equal, but in terms of time spent per page. Yeah. I mean, like, I agree. For me, it's been like, to be fair, I guess we both expected it to be worth it. Otherwise we wouldn't have started. But I was slightly, before we started, I thought like, maybe there's nothing to talk about. Or like, I don't know, like maybe this is just really boring, or we repeat the plot and then just say, okay, that's
Yeah, but I guess this was also a book worth discussing. I think that not all books would be suited for that kind of discussion because they might not lend themselves.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously a reason why this and I'm assuming we're going to do more books. Future books are going to be mainly classics because you have a bit more of a guarantee that you're not going to spend 6 hours going, this book is pointless and there's nothing to it. I mean, I think I don't think we could have chosen a better book, to be honest. I'd read, as I said, the first part in German a year ago or so, but I didn't really think of too much about like which book to read, like kind of pick this more or less at random. No, actually, the reason I picked this is because I heard that there's a fairly new translation, and that's supposed to be really good. Yeah. That's why I chose this one, and I think we agree that it is a good translation. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think we couldn't have chosen there were 6 parts. Each of them was equally long and around 100 pages, so you could do it in a week. I didn't know that before we started.
No, but it is good.
That was coincidence. It's a fairly plot-driven book, which helps. Mm-hmm. If it's very esoteric, metaphorical, a lot harder to talk about it than if you're talking about someone murdering someone and getting caught by the police. Like, it's a pretty... Yeah, I think we accidentally stumbled on a really good book to start this kind of discussion with. I mean, of course, format is going to depend on the book and that kind of stuff. But let's say we were going to read another book that's like this, roughly. Is there anything I don't know, anything you think in hindsight that, in terms of format of discussion or something, might
probably no, we should try to keep the summaries at the beginning brief and to the point. But I think you got better. And actually I only did the very first one. I was about to say, very bad.
Criticism received.
No, I didn't want mine. I think I did one at the very beginning and it was bad, and then we decided that you...
I can't even remember who did the first one. Yeah. Well, to be fair, no, actually, we just said we were going to take turns.
Yeah,
and then somehow we never did.
Maybe that's an improvement, that you need to make sure that the person you're talking to is actually putting their weight. Yeah, I think it's also, I think I have a tendency to skip over the basics. I mean, I do this also in my regular interviews. Something I've noticed recently is that, I always wanted to kind of start assuming that everyone understood the basics, so you don't have to repeat that again, right? So you can have like a higher level, more intelligent discussion. But I realize that when doing that, it's often pretty useful just to repeat the basics. In this case, for example, the plot.
to just say like this happened, this happened, this happened.
Yeah.
I found it
Because you can't
surprisingly
really assume
useful.
that.
Well, not even assume, just for us, right? Like
Yeah.
often I read it like
For
on
us,
Monday or
that's it.
Tuesday, and then like it's a week later, and I can't remember exactly what happened in each chapter.
Yeah,
But
and
then
you
just
immediately, as soon as you've listened to the summary, you've got something to go on.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, no, I think you're going to do amazingly.
Thanks.
This was the practice round, and now on to the good stuff.
Yeah, I mean, the practice round is going to be public, though, Antonia. I don't know what I told you. This is going to be published.
Yeah.
And maybe one day, it seems like you might join for another book discussion.
Oh, most
We'll see.
definitely.
Okay, well then, I think I don't think anyone's going to listen to now. If someone is still listening, it's patently absurd. It's been like 7 hours or something. But thank you for listening the entire time.
Thank you.
And good luck organizing your life better from now on, I guess.